Park Yong Han is a retired chief inspector. His grandson also works at the Dongnam police station. Due to the demanding nature of his job, his grandson doesn't have time to come home, so he specifically brings food and rice cakes, his grandson's favorite, to his workplace. However, before he can even eat, his grandson is called away on duty. Mr. Park has no choice but to leave. Looking at the commemorative photo at the police station, his heart is still filled with unforgettable emotions. In his youth, he was also a talented chief inspector with countless achievements. To move around easily without revealing his identity, Park Yong Han disguised himself as a beggar. While roaming around, he successfully caught the 96th cattle thief. This particular cow was the only source of income for Man-Soo to pay for his mother's surgery. While resisting Inspector Park, the ringleader unfortunately had his most prized possessions injured by a few of the cows. After being praised and commended by the entire department, it was also the time when the team leader announced the sad news: Inspector Park was about to leave. To celebrate his farewell, he took the entire team to his father's beer company for drinks. What has to happen eventually will happen. After saying goodbye to his father and colleagues, Park Yong Han packed his bags and headed to Seoul with the strong belief that he would make the front page of the Seoul newspaper. When Inspector Park stepped into the investigation room to prepare him for the future ahead, the team leader had to tell him in advance. Despite being mocked by his colleagues in the room for being from the countryside, Park Yong Han didn't hold back. He immediately retaliated, even making them feel put in their place. Barely having settled in, a cloth shop owner, covered in injuries, came to the police station to report a crime. Rarely having an opportunity to show his talent to his superiors, he quickly volunteered to catch Viper. Team leader Yu, although stating he wasn't worried, was still restless inside. After all, 30 gangsters were a bit too much for a rookie like Park Yong Han. While everyone thought that Inspector Park would have to fight for his life to catch the criminals, he did something unusual. He bought 30 venomous snakes for the 30 gangsters. Without exerting any effort, he successfully made Viper surrender. Upon returning to the police station after that feat, Inspector Choi, who had just received a bribe from Lee Yong-yi, heard that Park Yong Han was interrogating Chairman Lee's henchmen. He acted unreasonably, forcing Chief Yu to release the thugs immediately. On his first day on the job, Park Yong Han saw the injustice of Seoul. Inspector Park was very upset, but could not do anything. Team leader Yu could only take him to buy new clothes to comfort him. Right now, Inspector Kim Sang-sun was also being reprimanded by his superiors at the police station because he had gotten physical with Yong-yi's underlings. However, with his nickname, Mad Dog, even if the sky were to fall, Sang-sun was determined not to lower himself before those dregs of society. While Sang-sun was feeling dejected from being scolded by his boss, Inspector Park was getting acquainted with everyone at the boarding house. He had thought that releasing the snakes would scare them, but to his surprise, Inspector Park had gotten 2 other people involved, the umbrella shop owner and the snake seller. He was very hungry because he hadn't eaten anything in the morning, but the local people's attitude towards the police was so hateful that he couldn't bring himself to eat. Luckily, a young man introduced him to his grandmother's rice cake shop where he was able to eat his fill. Inspector Park witnessed the young man single-handedly battling Viper's mob with bundles of straw. Observing from the sidelines, he felt joyful because he didn't expect there to be such a brave citizen. Truly, a high-end Grim Reaper. Even while on the bus, Jong H-won managed to catch a pervert. Inspector Park was about to get to work on an assignment given by team leader Bayan when he received a warning from his own team leader that something might happen that day. He needed to keep an eye on the police station and do paperwork from morning till night. As soon as everyone was off work, he used strong arm tactics to force Inspector O to reveal where everyone at the station had gone. The reason why O was chosen was because the fear on his face was obvious to Inspector Park. As soon as he learned that everyone was hiding the fact that Lee Young-bum was involved in smuggling, he called Inspector Kim to go apprehend the criminals together. Unexpectedly, in order to carry out their drug trafficking smoothly, they had even enlisted the help of the US military police, not just colluding with officers domestically. He had thought that finding the mad dog to go along with him would mean they could both deliver justice. But unexpectedly, while he wasn't paying attention, Inspector Kim had ambushed him from behind. He thought that he would be able to investigate deeper after taking down Inspector Park. But a few seconds later, the mad dog was also taken down. It turned out he had gotten on the wrong side of these guys last year. In reality, Inspector Kim didn't want to turn on him. OS soldier had just taken aim at Inspector Park's head. He only wanted to save the life of his righteous colleague. After that hit and being thrown outside like that, Park Yong Han was extremely bitter. In fact, at that very moment, he thought about revenge, and it would be 1,000 times more brutal. Right after he had verbally educated the scum of the police station, he and Inspector Kim met Team Leader Yu at the entrance. Everyone had thought that Inspector Park was all bark and no bite, but no one at the police station had expected him to turn Lee Young-bum's warehouse into a place to give out free gifts to all the citizens. Because of this, Team Leader Byun and everyone else were severely reprimanded by Officer Choi. He tried to punish both Inspector Park and Inspector Kim as well, but they both used his own stick to beat him with. A common saying meaning they used his own actions against him. Lee Young-bum suffered a great loss because of this. He thought that if Inspector Yu remained silent, things would go more smoothly. He never imagined that Yu's subordinates would be trying to turn the social order upside down. This time, Lee Young-bum wouldn't stand idly by. He wanted to teach these rookies a lesson in manners. Lee Young-bum's henchmen immediately followed him. At first, he was taking them down one by one, but gradually, there were too many of them, so he had no choice but to flee. Initially, Haiju didn't intend to let him hide in her bookstore, but when she saw him pleading desperately, she relented and helped. After chasing the thugs away, he wanted to brag to Haiju about how he single-handedly defeated 17 people. But no matter what he said, she didn't believe him. Although he was very frustrated because it was the first time someone didn't believe him, he was still very happy. It seemed he had fallen in love at first sight. Right after receiving a call from the VP, Captain Yu went to check on Inspector Park. Seeing that he was still healthy, he left relieved. The dream of becoming a police officer in Dongnam is probably ridiculous, isn't it? Not only was Ho Jiang forced by his family to abandon his dream of becoming a police officer, but even Haiju thought it was a bad idea after hearing a regular customer talk about it. To add more righteous people to Team 1, Inspector Park started recruiting. The first person he wanted to pull in was none other than Inspector Kim. As soon as Mad Dog agreed to join the team, the two of them went to the local market together. The next person he wanted to recruit was the muscular rice vendor. That day, not giving up on his dream, Ho Jiang decided to apply to the police department. While his application was being approved by his superiors thanks to his intelligence, the rice vendor boy, Jo Jong H1, was also approved thanks to his strength. While celebrating Jong H1's successful test, Inspector Park inadvertently saw the intimate scene of the couple at the next table, and he immediately thought of Haiju. Thinking his doing, he immediately bought 2 movie tickets and went to find her. After much hesitation, and on the verge of giving up, he finally managed to ask her out. As if she had been waiting for a long time, Haiju quickly agreed. On his first day on the job, Ho Jiang was assigned by his superiors to investigate a case. Meanwhile, Jong H1 and the rest of the team were assigned by Inspector Choi to do community service, helping people in sea. Although it was suspicious to be sent away at this time, the team of 4 couldn't do anything about it. Not long after being praised, Ho Jiang was ridiculed by Team 2. An American man with a bag of firecrackers ran away, causing the police chief's car to explode. With the addition of new members to Team 1, righteous actions and catching bad thugs became easier and more enjoyable. Because no team was willing to handle the fight with the American soldiers, Captain Yu sent his subordinates to take care of it. Not knowing English, Inspector Park directly pulled Ho Jiang from Team 2 to translate, helping him escape the shoe shining duty. It had clearly been reported that the American soldiers were unarmed, but when they arrived on the scene, every last one of them had a gun and was confronting each other. There wasn't even time to get angry about the false information. What worried Inspector Park most at that moment was the safety of the local people. With no better option available, he decided to listen to Ho Jiang. The team successfully subdued the troublesome American soldiers using this method. After learning that the plan was the young boy's own idea, Inspector Park extended an offer to invite him to join Team 1 to work together. From now on, Team 1 would have their own Zhuge Liang to contribute to society. Team leader Bayan was very enthusiastic about Ho Jiang's transfer to Team 1. As the team was talking and enjoying themselves, Congressman Choi appeared and gave them their first mission: to chase the beggars out of the market area. Like loyal soldiers, no matter what Inspector Park said, the two rookies followed his orders without question. After catching the beggars, many of whom were petty thieves, he didn't take them back to the station. He just gave them a stern lecture and let them go. In his mind, there were much more serious criminals out there that weren't being caught, so there was no need to make things hard for these people who had committed minor offenses. Because Ho Jiang was telling such an engaging story, Inspector Park completely forgot about his date with Haiju. When he finally remembered and rushed over, it was far too late. Haiju had been waiting for him at the theater entrance from dawn until late at night. When she realized he wasn't coming, just like the title of the movie playing that day, The Man Who Never Returned, she sadly went back to her bookstore. While waiting for Haiju to close up, Inspector Park conveniently bought a new newspaper. On the front page, a large headline about an armed bank robbery caught the attention of many Dongnam residents. He understood that it was only a matter of time before the robbers would show up in Seoul to commit a crime. Team 1 quickly began their investigation. Thanks to their deductions and intelligence, the 5 of them were able to determine the identities of the perpetrators and the likely target location. When Team Leader Yu took advantage of Sergeant Choi calling an emergency meeting to report the situation, instead of receiving support, the team was forbidden from continuing their investigation immediately. Sergeant Choi only cared about President Lee's meeting tomorrow, rather than the safety of the people and the city. Unable to discuss matters at the station, Team Leader Yu decided to hold a secret meeting off-site. After assigning tasks to his subordinates, he led Park Yong Han to get clothes under the enthusiastic encouragement of the shop owner. Inspector Park then went to the bookstore to apologize to Haiju. Seeing his sincerity, she accepted his apology, which made him so happy he felt like crying. On their way home together, Haiju even bought him a bracelet to cover the scar on his wrist. Just as the robbers decided to target Goryeo Bank, on the other side, at Inspector Park's boarding room, thanks to the help of a bank employee from the neighboring room, the team quickly determined that Goryeo Bank would definitely be the robbers' next target. Just as Inspector Park said, saving a group of beggars once makes them absolutely loyal. Now, the team has a network of eyes and ears to monitor the robbers in this operation. The team also has the help of Yoon Dong, who has helped everyone understand more about the banks in the area. Thanks to Inspector Park's perfect plan, which allowed the new recruits to practice shooting while gathering information about the robbers, the team was indeed informed of their appearance as quickly as possible. At the same time, the shooting skills of Ho Jiang and Jong H1 also improved significantly. To minimize losses during the upcoming robbery, Inspector Park exploited Chief Choi's reputation to place Inspector Kim in the bank as a security guard. Although he knew that the security guard is always the first to be killed, Mad Dog really wanted to refuse. However, after losing rock paper scissors to Kang Hoon, he had no choice but to accept his fate. Using his intelligence and deductions, Ho Jiang figured out the time the robbers would strike. As predicted, even though the team had confirmed information about the time and location where the robbers would appear, Sergeant Choi still didn't care. Without assistance from the police department, Team 1 could only act according to their pre-arranged plan. But unexpectedly, Sergeant Choi had the entire team arrested to avoid causing trouble for the 11 meeting. Fortunately, the guard was Officer Kim. Exploiting what is called human kindness, the team was released. In addition, they also got a guide, which made movement easier than ever. Due to excessive delays, Plan A was no longer feasible. The team had no choice but to switch to Plan B, to knock the bank manager out cold so that no one could wake him up. allowing Inspector Kim to gradually navigate the chaos inside. Inspector Park disguised himself as an accomplice of the robbers, but because they took civilians hostage, the team couldn't finish things. They were left with no other choice but to play cat and mouse with the robbers in the streets. While Inspector Park was about to be exposed, the hostage Haiju helped him attract their attention. But man proposes, God disposes. His mask was forcefully pulled off. Even though the robbers discovered his true identity, their final fate was still being arrested and sent to prison. Through this chance encounter, Haiju became even closer to Inspector Park. However, Ho Jeong was heartbroken. He was instrumental in the recent capture, but the rewards and praise all went to Sergeant Choi. Refusing to give up, team leader Yu and the whole team rallied to force him to donate the prize money. Fortunately, for this date, Inspector Park wasn't too late to see the movie The Man Who Returned with Haiju. Due to his frequent visits to the rice cake shop, Inspector Park gradually became a regular customer. Always excited to try new dishes the restaurant owner came up with, Inspector Kim couldn't stand it any longer when he saw his colleagues in Squad 2 refusing to help the family search for their missing child, even finding excuses to turn them away. He abruptly stood up and transferred the case to his own squad, Squad 1. After some questioning, the team gathered some information. Dong-gu, a 6-month-old baby boy with 6 fingers on his left hand, and a diaper embroidered with a golden turtle, was taken while his mother and the baby were sleeping at home. To help the grandmother more easily approach literacy, Inspector Park and Haiju worked together to convince Nan to find a smart young woman with dreams of becoming a police officer to tutor the young boy. The next morning, as soon as they arrived at the station, the team read the news. 10 newborns had died during military training. One of the 10 had polydactyly. Upon seeing this news, Jong-gu's mother quickly came to the police station. Of course, there was no proof that the child who had died was hers, so everyone advised her to remain calm. Knowing that the Hojang police station had jurisdiction over the mass grave case, Inspector Park's team quickly went there. However, the team only received word that the captain there had already had the children buried. With no other option, the team could only split up. Wanting to get information from the army's surgeon, they were only informed that he had been transferred. As for Inspector Park and Inspector Kim, after visiting the orphanage, both were certain that the director there was kidnapping children and selling them for money. However, they had no evidence to accuse her. It was through this that Park learned that Inspector Kim was, in fact, an orphan. Before leaving, they saw a child from the orphanage sitting under a tree crying. He seemed extremely upset, but no matter how many times they asked, he would politely reply, "It's okay," and walk away, not wanting to stop. Ho Jeong and Kang Hoon went to find the journalist who wrote the news about the children. However, what they got was the news that he had been stabbed and was unconscious early that morning. While they were wondering how to investigate the orphanage director, Captain Yu appeared like a savior. It turned out he knew a lot about her. He had her past information at his fingertips. Knowing that the military surgeon had been transferred to Mojang Island, Captain Yu recommended sending Ho Jeong there. This was something the whole team readily agreed to. Sergeant Choi, after being informed, angrily went to the police station. Captain Yu had no choice but to tell the others to hide while he handled the situation. Not only was Inspector Park successful in finding a tutor, he was also gifted a new pair of shoes. This made him, a boy at heart, very touched. While Sung Chil was alone dealing with a group of vipers who were harassing an old man's family, fortunately his underlings pulled him away. Ho Jeong, on the other hand, was seasick and going crazy. Even though he was reciting multiplication tables, he didn't feel any better. They had questioned many people who frequented Dong Jun's mother and son's home, but they didn't find a single clue. Inspector Kim and Inspector Park were left with no other choice than to kneel and pretend to be pitiful in front of the director in order to stay at the orphanage. Indeed, heaven does not forsake the persistent. After a day of frantic searching, Inspector Kim finally found a partially burned piece of fabric with the golden turtle embroidery belonging to Dong-gu. This discovery caused the child's mother immense heartbreak. Based on Kang Hoon's investigation, the team had a new lead that might lead them to Jiam. It turned out that all the families who had babies abducted were using the same brand of knockoff cosmetics. After tailing the cosmetics store owner, Inspector Kim and Kang Hoon arrived at a gambling den. Immediately, Inspector Park and the two others stormed into the den in search of the owner. They expected the gambling den to be shut down, but it turned out the three officers were only there to ask the owner to pressure the cosmetics store owner to pay off her debts in full by the next day. Thanks to Ho Jeong's grueling search at sea, he brought back a wealth of useful information for the team, including what he managed to obtain from the reassigned military surgeon. Mentioning the injection marks, Inspector Park guessed that this had something to do with the clinic in Daejin that the boy at the orphanage had mentioned. The most crucial thing now was to capture the cosmetics store owner. Indeed, when cornered, people are forced to take drastic measures to save themselves. This was no exception for the store owner. Just as the team planned, they were only moments away from capturing the money courier. But because the courier had a car, they were one step too late. From questioning the cosmetics store owner, Inspector Kim and Inspector Park didn't obtain much information. Therefore, Ho Jeong and Kang Hoon had to arrest the doctor at the Daejin clinic to interrogate him. Based on the doctor's testimony, Team 1 went to the orphanage and arrested all the staff there for questioning. Thanks to the identification by the cosmetics store owner, the team found Jun, who was the person she frequently did business with. Immediately after concluding a meeting with the Liberty Party, the orphanage director was arrested by Inspectors Kim and Park and brought back to the station. Of course, her secretary, Kim, was no exception. Seeing that her subordinates were so willing to go to prison for her, team leader Yu decided to investigate. The results shocked the entire team. Both of them had previously worked at the ex-Kang Academy where GM used to be employed. No wonder they were so brainwashed. While trying to get a statement from Jun and Secretary Kim, Sergeant Troy suddenly appeared. It turned out that the president of the Women's Association had personally stepped in to rescue her trusted secretary, Kim Ra. Just when it seemed like it was all over, Inspector Kim brought in the child from the orphanage as evidence. Thanks to Inspector Park's persuasive skills, the Women's Association president sided with Team 1. As a result, Kim Ra was arrested for her crimes. It turned out that while trying to bring down his body temperature, Inspector Kim had gone to the orphanage to talk to the child. The child's mother was eventually sent to the next life by the monks at the temple. The entire inspection team's presence at the ceremony was like a nightmare. The dream about the origin of the scar on Inspector Park's hand haunted him every night. A chilling fear gripped him, making it hard to breathe, because the director had unfortunately been killed in her cell. The police department found kind homes to adopt the children from the camp. They were chatting happily when curfew arrived. Haiju, very frightened, grabbed Inspector Park's hand and ran. Because he wanted to be near her longer, he didn't reveal that he was carrying a police badge. In the cramped space, with just a man and a woman, it was hard to resist sharing a passionate kiss. No sooner had Inspector Park returned to the police station with the dregs than he received news of Sung Chil's murder. In the blink of an eye, just yesterday they had heard from Haiju that the boy was making great progress in his studies, and today he had departed without a word. Everyone there was heartbroken. However, not a single citizen dared to utter a word. This also made Inspector Park realize who was behind it. At that moment, from behind the door, Gung Ok appeared and told him and his team about Sung Chil's confrontation with the Viper Gang that day. Fueled with anger, the 4 members of Team 1 charged straight into Viper's stronghold, taking down all his underlings before bringing the scoundrel back to the police station. Inspector Park beat him within an inch of his life. News of his men's capture quickly reached El Zongbyum. He swiftly sent his own men to act as witnesses for Viper. Predictably, a fit of Sergeant Choi's fury fell upon the members of Team 1 once again. However, who would give up on punishing the bad guys? Starting at the crime scene, due to the chaos and the fact that all traces had been wiped clean, the team couldn't find any leads. The only thing left was Sung Chil's body. Therefore, Inspector Park and Haiju went to persuade Mrs. Ho to allow them to perform an autopsy. Although no one was a true relative of Sung Chil, his sudden death caused great sadness to everyone. With her consent, The team took the body to the examination room. From there, they deduced that at least 3 people were involved in Sung Chil's murder. While busily working to bring the brutal perpetrators to justice, Inspector Park failed to notice that many people were offering money and gifts to the black and white church. Fortunately, his landlady told him right after he returned to his room. Wanting to exploit this church to get the weapon used to murder Sung Chil, the team quickly interrogated the inspector. After learning that he had previously investigated this church, and still traumatized by the forced interrogation in the bathroom before, he had no choice but to show the team the location of the black and white church. Among the fanatic crowd of locals, the team clearly saw a rattlesnake of a man. He, too, was wholeheartedly devoted to prayer. With just a brief glance, Inspector Park quickly recognized their deceptive scheme. Exploiting this, he intimidated the local cult leader into helping him conduct the investigation as planned. The rattlesnake was very obedient to the church's leader. He and his accomplices led the investigation team to the place where they had hidden the murder weapon. Although they had found the evidence, no arrest warrants were issued. The reason was due to the close relationship between their boss and Sergeant Choi. Looking at the criminals, Yong Han was smug, and Inspector Park was so furious he was brought to tears. With a heavy heart, he went to the bookstore, recounting the story while his tears flowed. This deeply saddened Haiju. Thanks to a comforting drinking session with his roommates, Inspector Park figured out how to catch those treacherous murderers. He devised a plan to force Viper into becoming an international criminal, enlisting the aid of the US government to arrest him. This plan invigorated the entire team. The feeling of frustration from the past few days quickly dissipated. With Steven's help, Viper was apprehended by us soldiers as the team had planned. Knowing that Chairman Lee wouldn't let his right-hand man's conflict with us soldiers jeopardize his burgeoning career, Inspector Park went directly to his house to make an offer. The Jongnam Daily would not mention this altercation. Instead, Chairman Lee would have to agree to his henchman being arrested for murder. As soon as the news was printed in the paper, all the residents around Mrs. Ho's house came to apologize. They were very ashamed for not daring to stand up and find the real perpetrator who killed Zung Chin. Learning from Viper's case, Chairman Lee issued a warning to his other key subordinates. However, Jong Hwan and his Enzin group played a dirty trick on Lee's subordinate. Immediately after he left the house, Chairman Lee was furious about this matter. Not only did he suffer significant losses, but he also dragged down the commander of the Korean Armed Forces with him. That contract was truly a disaster. No longer wanting to suffer losses, Chairman Lee personally met with Inspector Park and made an offer. He firmly rejected it. Although he knew that this rejection would come at a great price, he was still willing to accept it. Despite practicing Jong Hwan's proposal many times, when facing Haiju, he said something different but still received her acceptance to marry him. Their wedding was joyful with the approval of both families. Nan Sil, the high school girl from back then, successfully passed the police academy in 1960 and became a subordinate of Team 1. Having arrested too many scum of society, it was only natural that they would seek revenge. One dark night on his way home, Captain Yu was ambushed by 3 masked men, punched, kicked, and stabbed in the leg. After finishing the job, they left without looking back. I'm incredibly disheartened by the news about Yong Ho Cheol, the serial killer who has escaped. This is the second time he's managed to evade the police. When Seo, Park Yong Han's grandson, comes to visit, he sees that his grandson is also feeling down and frustrated by the news. Park consoles and encourages him a great deal. Seeing his grandson practically driven mad, thinking day and night about the killer, Park Yong Han is reminded of the old days, specifically December of 1961. Thanks to the effective collaboration of Team 1 and the street urchins, they successfully dismantled a ring that was mixing corn flour with sawdust and selling it on the market. While Chief Choi is being reprimanded by the Kang Student Association and is facing potential dismissal, Team 1 is happily chatting and gossiping. Just as they return to the police station, they witness Officer Bong being forced to clean Officer O's trash. A few words from the team were enough to change Bong's attitude towards Tan Bin completely. Despite the reminder from Officer Bong, Team 1 is still scolded by Captain Bayan for not going after the rebels. Instead, they are discussing who will be the next inspector. At that moment, Captain Yu returns, bringing the news that Kung Du and Imasu are to be executed for abusing their soon-to-be-announced position as Deputy National Director. Chief Choi bribed the former commander, who was once close to Chairman Lee, with the title of inspector, to resolve the trouble caused by the Kang Student Association. Just a while before, they were happily eating and drinking with the team, but now Captain Yu is injured and in the hospital. While talking with Haidu, Ho Jiang comes to get him. The news about Captain Yu's attack shocks him greatly. Not only does Inspector Park break down upon seeing Captain Yu in such a state, but Inspector Kim, Ho Jiang, and Kang Hoon are also distraught. While waiting for the captain to regain consciousness, Inspector Park and his colleagues resolve to find the person who injured the chief. Song Nam believes that the Dongjeon gang is the most likely suspect. However, after questioning each member closely, they can't identify anyone suspicious. Thanks to a clue that they called the rattlesnake's word, the team realizes something was not right. A normal person couldn't wield a knife with such skill. The person capable of such a feat could only be from special forces. Seeing that nobody at the police station, except for a few members of Team 1, cares about Captain Yu's condition, Inspector Park becomes furious. However, upon seeing his wife still at the hospital, taking care of the captain, he has a complete change of heart. After finding out that the new inspector is the commander who forced him to shoot people when he was still a military student, Inspector Park is deeply shocked. That trauma has never faded in all these years. Baek Du-seok never expected that doing something as small as injuring Captain Yu of the police department would be such a big deal. And then I got a sudden promotion like this, knowing that Inspector Park was intensely eager to find the person who stabbed his captain. Inspector Park deliberately brought it up the moment he met with him, based on the tip-off from Officer Bong during their secret meeting. Inspector Park decided that the whole team would first meet with the captain to question him, and then take it from there. While avoiding Inspector Baek, who was currently doing a tour of several parks in Sea, Team 1 also managed to obtain valuable information from the captain. Ultimately, everything pointed towards Deputy National Police Commissioner Choi. However, how to delve deeper was the question they needed to consider more than ever, in order to find someone who could back them and pull strings here. Unfazed, Inspector Baek knelt reverently before the corrupt inner circle of high-ranking officials within the South Korean political machine. Meanwhile, Inspector Park went alone to confront Deputy Commissioner Choi. His colleagues at the station helped Officer Bong escape a slap from Detective Kang, who was furious that he disobeyed orders, as he was determined to arrest Deputy Commissioner Choi. Consequently, Bong was forcibly taken back to the station. Thanks to the ill-timed visit from Inspector Park, Haiju also accidentally overheard the danger her husband, an Ngai, was in. She then brought Captain Yu back to the police station so she could help him. Even though she wasn't sure how much it would help, Captain Yu's appearance greatly surprised those loyal to Deputy Commissioner Choi and brought immense joy to Team 1. While Haiju was explaining to everyone the secret plan her husband and Captain Yu had devised earlier, Inspector Park and the captain were in a private room, talking to Deputy Commissioner Choi and Inspector Baek. Apparently, the evidence they'd found could overthrow Choi's current position. However, Captain Yu did not do so. He would destroy all the evidence, only on the condition that Team 1 be left alone and allowed to do whatever they wanted. At first, Park was furious that his captain would make such a decision. However, he quickly calmed his emotions, sure that there must be some reason why the captain did it. It wasn't until they returned to the hospital room and were surrounded by his subordinates that Captain Yu revealed why he'd torn up the evidence, understanding that the situation was not as simple as it seemed that morning. Despite Inspector Baek's pleas, Deputy Commissioner Choi still just forced him to shut up and follow his orders. While on the way to pray with his wife, Inspector Park witnessed a group of people chasing away a woman. Despite the nun's pleas, he couldn't just stand by and watch, so he stepped in to help the woman. However, she just quickly ran away without even thanking him. After praying, the young couple, Inspector Park and his wife, sat down together, sharing their wishes they'd made to Buddha. On the other side, Ho Jiang was at a loss for words, having tried to explain the difference between gambling and stocks to Jong Hwan and Inspector Kim, but both of them just wouldn't understand. While driving his wife home, Inspector Park and his wife inadvertently came across a murder on the street. The victim had fallen from a high floor, dying instantly. After his team arrived, he and the others quickly identified the victim as Hong In-ho, an employee of a securities company. From the clues found at the scene, Captain Yu and his subordinates quickly realized that this was an assassination. However, the perpetrator was inexperienced. Their plan was also very loose and flawed. They had originally planned to wait for a handwriting expert to examine the will, but unfortunately, they had to go on a business trip to Busan. This would make the investigation take much longer than expected. After taking statements from the victim's wife, boss, and colleagues, Inspector Park noticed that the two sides' testimonies were completely contradictory. It seemed that something was being concealed by Hong In-ho, but it was highly likely that it was related to the securities company where he worked. Just as Captain Yu had managed to recruit the best handwriting expert in Joseon, Chief Inspector Beek called him and Inspector Park into his office. It turned out that the chief inspector had previously been ordered by the deputy chief of police that any murder cases involving securities would be transferred to the National Police Agency, as the victim's wife was about to give birth and was alone. Inspector Park asked his wife to visit and care for the victim's wife more often. Naturally, Haiju was happy to agree to this request. While taking a statement from a local who had previously entered the staff room, Inspector Park and Jong Hwan managed to obtain useful testimony. Officer Nam, while following orders to look for the residences of people who had suffered from leprosy, accidentally discovered that they were hiding in the stacks of straw near the escape exit of the building that Hong In-ho had fallen from. Not originally intending to say what she had seen, she decided to reveal it thanks to the arrival of Inspector Park, who had once helped her escape the persecution of the local residents. Unlike those outside the neighborhood, Inspector Park's colleagues were very concerned about the lepers in this area. They received such care and were very moved and grateful. Those in the profession were bound to be more understanding than the average person. To learn more about this securities company, Inspector Park asked Yoon Dong to help him. From what Yoon Dong revealed, the team learned of a man named Jun Sang-ti. He was the one who had founded this securities company and two others. What he was doing was market manipulation. However, to be able to do that, the person backing him had to be someone very powerful. Someone who held information about a whole country could only be someone from the Central Intelligence Agency. After learning that Na Gun-soo would visit Yoon Dong's bank company chairman every Wednesday, Inspector Park and his team kept close surveillance on him. The team arrived at a gambling den where he quickly identified a man with an arm wrestling physique matching the description given by the woman. Aware that he still lacked any evidence to make him confess, he and his team could only return to the police station. Based on the description from his subordinates, team leader Yu quickly identified the man as Jang Jio-kai, the boss of the gambling dens in northern Seoul. According to Yoon Dong, it was highly likely that Na-gun intended to recruit him for his own purposes. Fearing her discovery was insignificant, but wanting to be sure they hadn't missed anything crucial in the case, Nan-sil still decided to inform Inspector Park about what she had found. After leaving the station, this information helped her solve a difficult question in the case. Very soon, the team would catch the perpetrator. The old saying was true. To catch a tiger, you have to go into its lair. He and his team charged straight into the gambling den and apprehended 3 scoundrels connected to the murder of Hong In-ho. With just a bit more effort, he could have gotten these 3 to confess to their crimes. However, at the most critical moment, Chief Inspector Beek arrived with officers from the National Police Agency to take them into custody. While his subordinates were out investigating the case, team leader Yu had discovered that Na-gun was the nephew of Jun Sang-ti. It was likely he was simply following his uncle's orders. Knowing he couldn't control Na-gun, Inspector Park could only keep the other 2 criminals at the station. After all, aside from Na-gun having a powerful backer, the others didn't have any protection behind them. The murderer of Hong In-ho was punished according to the law, and at the same time, the victim's wife successfully gave birth to a child. He and his wife made a special visit to their house to congratulate them and share the good news. Despite offering advice to his other colleagues at the police station, no one would listen. As a result, the team could only watch as they headed down the path to ruin. Those with connections in his case also quickly disappeared. The only one who directly committed the murder was found having hanged himself in prison. Knowing Haiju was very worried about their ongoing infertility, Inspector Park reluctantly said he wasn't concerned to comfort her. But in reality, he was very afraid that his child wouldn't be able to endure a life filled with so much ugliness. In just one night, 3 middle-aged men were severely assaulted and robbed of all their belongings. Team 1 was about to go investigate when Officer Bong reported that a woman in her 30s had been murdered. With no other choice, Inspector Park had to split the team. He and Ho Jeong would go to the murder scene, while Inspector Kim and Han would look into the robbery. From the crime scene and the preliminary findings of the medical examiner, it's highly likely that the perpetrator was someone known to the family. Based on Man Su's statements, Inspector Park gained a basic understanding of the family's circumstances. The father had passed away last year, and their only son had a lung condition. While Inspector Kim and Jong H-won, following the testimony, were searching for the murder weapon, Inspector Park and Ho Jeong, based on information from the neighbors, discovered the boyfriend of Man Su's mother. He was the manager of Chun Tap BBQ restaurant. Although he felt it unnecessary for 20 officers from the police station to escort the ladies shopping, due to Deputy Chief Choi's orders, Inspector Beek had no choice but to comply to avoid being seen as insubordinate. Inspector Beek, using the excuse that Captain Hang had discovered 2 shipments of smuggled goods at the Dongnam shopping center, secretly assigned his own people to investigate and make arrests. In this way, he could kill 2 birds with 1 stone. To verify the statement of Duck Young, the victim's boyfriend, Inspector Park went to his boarding house to speak with the landlady. There, he found a white shirt with bloodstains and a shoe print matching the one at the crime scene. While ordering Ho Jeong to arrest Duck Young, he stopped by Man Su's house for a visit. This led to him learning about the big argument between the boy's mother and her boyfriend the previous week. Through an accidental altercation between Jong H-won and Inspector Kim with 3 drunk Gosen pioneers, they managed to identify the perpetrators of the 3 robberies from the previous night. Just when they thought that everything would be resolved easily, at the last minute, the Pioneer team leader testified on behalf of the 3 Pioneer members, and Duck Young's roommate also provided an alibi for him. Needless to say, Team 1 returned empty-handed after a full day's work. On the way back, based on statements from Duck Young and Man Su, Inspector Park decided to change direction and go to the boy's house. Unexpectedly, he saw the boy, despite being in his swimwear, happily looking at a piece of paper. According to Officer Bong's investigation, Man Su was also present at the scene when his father drowned. The fact that a skilled swimmer had died from drowning was quite suspicious. While Chief Inspector Beek was being criticized and warned by the Deputy Chief about the Dongnam department store incident, Inspector Kim and Jong H-won received news that the 3rd victim of the robbery had regained consciousness. They immediately rushed there because a close friend from their high school days, Jang Jia, was working at a company. So, Nan Sil would occasionally visit. This time, because her friend was very worried about an employee who had suddenly disappeared at the beginning of the month, Nan Sil decided to investigate. Unexpectedly, when she reviewed the case file, she discovered that Team 2 had closed the case very carelessly and irresponsibly. Although he hated suspecting the victim's son as the perpetrator, with his keen observation skills and everything he had found, Inspector Park couldn't help but consider the possibility. Indeed, during this visit to Mansu, he and Ho Jeong successfully exposed the crimes of a child who was almost 14 years old, while Inspector Kim and Jong H-won were essentially waiting for something to fall in their lap. Inspector Beek, as obedient as a puppy, went to meet with the sons of high-ranking officials, changing his tactics. With one fell swoop, Inspector Kim and Ho Jeong managed to apprehend the group of thieves. Although he received a rather painful blow to the head, thankfully, he had his golden bowl. Otherwise, Inspector Kim would surely be the one lying unconscious right now. It was unbelievable that the 3 children involved in the robbery were only 17 years old. But when they learned that these kids were only doing this to get revenge on Jang Jio-kai, the head of the Vanguard group, because they hadn't been treated like human beings, Inspector Kim and Jong H-won felt a strong sense of empathy. Seeing that Man-soo showed no remorse for his actions, Inspector Park was furious. The law here is very lenient with juvenile offenders, just like him. But fortunately, thanks to his meeting with the school teacher that day, he discovered that the boy was no longer a minor. His real age was a year older. To determine if they should be lenient with the boy, he and Ho Jeong staged a scene on the road while escorting him back. The result was deeply disappointing. He showed absolutely no remorse. He only knelt down begging for mercy because he was afraid of being shot. Therefore, he decided to send him to a reformatory to live the prison life that he deserved. It was unbelievable that both cases the first team had received this time involved children. Man-soo had been punished accordingly, but what about the other 3? Deceived by the government, who would compensate them? This question was answered very clearly by Inspector Park. If the government won't do it, then the first team will do it instead. Storming into the Vanguard group's headquarters, pointing a gun at Jang Jio-kai's head, firing a bullet into the sign as a warning. That's what he and his teammates did to rescue the children who had been lured. Meanwhile, just as he arrived at the police station, Deputy National Police Chief Choi was arrested by the Special Prosecutor's Office for violating the Act on Illegal Assets and the Act on Special Crimes. Before the joy of solving the case could even sink in, the news of Haiju's pregnancy arrived. Inspector Park couldn't even express how happy he was to hear that he was about to become a father. There wasn't a case the first team couldn't solve. To catch the deserter from the 4th Tactical Team, Park Jin-soo, the entire team dressed to the nines to attend the party that he was attending, charged with defrauding Jang Soo-hai and numerous other women. After handing the certificate to the woman, Inspector Park didn't forget to remind her to be careful of strangers who offered to help her. Although she invited him and everyone to stay for a meal to express her gratitude, he politely declined. After all, a meal was the first step towards bribery. This time, Officer Bong took Jang Soo straight to the police station to report the disappearance of Kim Soon-young, a female colleague who had been missing for 2 weeks at the textile factory. Learning about the superficial investigation by the second team, Inspector Park was furious. It wasn't just him. Everyone in the first team felt the same way. Seeing the tension on his face and the others, Captain Hang handed the case over to his team. Before commencing the investigation, Inspector Kim and Jong H-won promised to punch Captain Hang 3 times in the face if anything unfortunate happened to the female factory worker. According to Jang Do, 5 beautiful and kind female workers had disappeared. The commonality among them was that they all vanished 1 or 2 days after the beginning of the month meeting. While questioning the manager of Dongsan Textile Company, Inspector Park noticed bruises on her face. While his colleague was diverting the manager's attention, he approached her to inquire about it. Based on B-sun's testimony, the factory manager had embezzled the workers' assets and had also abetted his boss, leading to the disappearances of those beautiful girls. Despite being warned by the manager not to touch his boss, Inspector Park wasn't one to be intimidated. He still took the boss into custody as usual. As soon as he heard that Team 1 had arrested Gun, the youngest son of the Kang Hoon conglomerate, Deputy Inspector Beek knew that his time to repay his debt had come. It turned out that the inept and useless children of high-ranking officials had helped him eliminate Deputy Police Chief Troy. In return, he had to help them clean up the messes they created. Witnessing Deputy Inspector Beek's cowering demeanor as he opened the handcuffs for Gun, who acted arrogantly and brazenly, Team 1 was reminded of the Lung De Bi incident 5 years prior. It was just like then. Ultimately, those who commit crimes must still pay for them. Just as the suspect left the police station, the team received news of a female corpse wearing a uniform from Dongsan Textile Company on Mount Orem. The deceased was none other than Kim Soon-young. The person who discovered the body, after recounting the process of finding it, also expressed his surprise. It had been 15 days since he had seen crows flying in the sky. Normally, the bodies should have been mauled by wild animals, yet this one was intact. The forensic doctor pointed out many signs of violent assault, beatings, and sexual assault. Moreover, there was extensive evidence showing that this young girl had been tortured to death before being thrown off the cliff. After the autopsy was completed, the team also found large amounts of narcotics in her system. In order to gradually apprehend Gunn, Inspector Park began by arresting the person who had sold him the narcotics. Captain Yu would help him question the narcotics squad regarding this. Through background checks, the team also discovered 3 close friends of that bastard Gunn. It was very possible that the case they were investigating involved these 4 individuals. After all, they were close friends, regardless of who their fathers were or their high-ranking positions in politics. Inspector Park was only concerned with one thing: catching the criminals and making them pay. From the uncooperative chatter of the 4 spoiled brats, Anne and the team learned that on that evening, after they finished playing tennis, they had returned to Mokrongak to drink. Additionally, the wound on No Yoon Hak's neck was confirmed to have been inflicted by Sun Yoon. To gather more concrete evidence for the case, he and Inspector Kim went to Mokrongak and met the owner. Even though he knew he wouldn't get any leads from her, he still deliberately went. Before leaving, he didn't forget to say a few profound things to make the owner think deeply. Witnessing Jang Sung-hai, his employee, speaking respectfully to the 2 inspectors after learning they were the ones who helped her get her identification papers back, the owner's face momentarily showed a pondering expression. While discussing things at the police station, the appearance of Sung Young's mother and 2 younger siblings plunged everyone into contemplation. After learning her daughter had passed away, the mother was heartbroken, as if her flesh was being sliced away piece by piece. Seeing this, Inspector Park decided, at any cost, he would catch the ones who killed Sung Young so she could rest in peace. The aggressive nature of the 4 spoiled and privileged kids was like that of mad dogs, biting anyone they encountered. Just because a staff member named Kim Young-hoon at the tennis court didn't play well, causing one of the 4 to fall, they immediately started yelling and became physical. As always, they used money to silence him. One would think that their brotherly bond was strong, but since a few police officers started bothering them, they had gradually become internally divided. After some time thinking, the owner of Mokrongak finally decided to go to Haiju's bookstore. There, she told Inspector Park everything he wanted to know about the 4 Playboy sons. Young Hee-sung, the handsome one with glasses, might appear to be the best and most stable of the 4. However, no one would dare to believe that he was the most vile and despicable of them all. The other 3 were more tolerable than Young Hee-sung, but they were not innocent either. They enjoyed the torture that the kid with glasses inflicted on the girls. Every time they came to the bar, they cruelly tormented the owner's employees. However, starting 4 or 5 months ago, they suddenly stopped calling for the bar's staff. On the road, Kwon Hyung-jun, Nam Young-gil, and No Yoon Hak were suddenly hit by a car. Unable to avoid it, all 3 were severely injured. Inspector Park and his team witnessed this while passing by. After taking them to the hospital, at the scene of the accident, Ho Jeong found a box of opium. The team deduced that this likely belonged to Nam Young-gil, since he was the only one with injection marks on his arm. Based on his deductions, it's very likely that Young Hee-sung caused the accident. To save himself, he was capable of anything. Remembering that Nam Young-gil was the only one who survived the accident, Inspector Park felt something terrible might happen. So he and his team rushed to the hospital. Indeed, that perverted sleazeball is here. He's as usual, flaunting his innocent as a lamb facade. But upon seeing Nam Young-gil's opium box, he suddenly recoiled, seeming terrified and evasive, thinking about what happened that day. Ho Jeong's hands were trembling. Just as Inspector Park suspected, he was the one who directly sent Jun Sung away to ensure Nam Young-gil's safety. Until the team gets statements, they needed to arrange someone intelligent enough to stay there and keep watch. And who else but Officer Nam? Due to extreme fear, Young Hee-sung went to the police station to meet Chief Inspector Beek, thinking he could still arrogantly order him around like before. But the tables had turned, and he received a slap instead. It was him who was warned and threatened this time, not Chief Inspector Beek. To quickly close the case, of course, a stand-in for Yong Hee-sung was essential. Detective Kang bribed a struggling man to confess in his place, and also refuted the news of opium in the car, replacing it with high-quality salt. This news spread like wildfire to help that bastard Han Sung escape suspicion. Unable to endure it any longer, this time, Captain Yu ordered his subordinates to consider Chief Inspector Beek a suspect, an accomplice of those spoiled rich kids. Just as the news of Nam Young-gil waking up reached the team, Ho Jiang appeared at the hospital. He didn't know how to approach Dong Jin because the security detail had been replaced by Hee-sung's men, and their numbers were increased. Suddenly, Inspector Park had an idea, befitting his nickname, the Dirty Scumbag. The moment Dong Rin's mother left, he revealed his true nature, a deplorable, despicable bastard. To attract the attention of security, Detective Kim and Ho Jiang posed as reporters, causing a commotion outside while trying to suffocate Young-gil with a pillow. Luckily, Inspector Park succeeded in entering the room through the window. Without a word, he quickly escorted Yong Hee-sung back to the police station. After discovering that Young Guk Jin, Yong Hee-sung's father, was facing significant trouble within the government, Chief Inspector Beek brazenly went to Colonel Dung's house. With what he had already resolved, his precious son was now able to threaten and intimidate. Upon receiving news that Ho Jiang was arrested from Captain Hang Beek Du-siak, he immediately went to take him away. Before he left, Inspector Park warned him. The day he falls from grace is not far off, and live carefully. Upon receiving the news that his wretched son had been arrested for attempting to kill Nam Young-gil, Colonel Young knew that he was out of options. His only recourse was to turn to Beek Du-siak. Before accepting the call, Beek Du-siak had carefully weighed the pros and cons, along with the possible escape routes available to him. Under Captain Yu's orders, Inspectors Park and Kim went to the hospital to persuade Young-gil's mother to allow him to testify in the case of the factory worker. Although he had told Inspector Park and Inspector Kim everything, no matter how much they tried to convince him, he refused to testify in court. The main reason was that he had already escaped death once, and he wasn't willing to risk his life a second time. Not knowing what to do next, Officer Bong brought good news to the team. She and her friend, along with Sun, had convinced the 4 remaining missing individuals to meet with the team today at Haiju's bookstore. Before the 4 left, Haiju gave one of them a letter that Sung Jun's mother had left for them. Everyone cried as they read the letter. Having found a suitable escape route for himself, Beek Du-siak called Colonel Young back, demanding a 100 million donation to help him escape. He would help him deal with Nam Young-gil. Immediately after ending the call with Beek Du-siak, Colonel Young dialed another number. This loose cannon was out of control, and he would be at the Dongnam Church at 11 p.m. It seemed that he also had a plan of his own. While preparing to send the 4 women to the train station to return home, Inspector Park received news that they all had agreed to testify in court. However, they were also terrified of being killed by his senior inspector and another inspector. They had received this threat as soon as they arrived from their hometown. To ensure their safety, he promised that he would bring those men to justice and make them responsible for their actions. Initially, Captain Yu had wanted to give Yong Hee-sung a chance to call his mother to repent, so he had deliberately assigned Captain Hang and Inspector O to guard him. However, he showed no remorse or regret at all. Therefore, the chance to make that call was very far away for him. Upon returning to his desk, the news of Nam Young-gil's arrest was relayed to Captain Yu by Officer Nam, indicating there was no time to lose. He immediately called and notified Inspector Park. As soon as the information was received, Nam Young-gil was arrested by Inspector Kang. Arriving at the Dongnam Church, Beek Du-siak was already there. He and his team immediately set off. It was already 11 p.m., but Colonel Dung was still nowhere to be seen. Instead, 10 men in suits appeared. Knowing that Young Guk Jin was trying to silence witnesses through murder, Beek Du-siak and Inspector Kang had openly committed murder right in the church. Thanks to the defection of Captain Hang and Inspector O at this time, Securing the civilians' safe exit from the church became easier than ever. The men in black suits were also quickly taken down. Certain that Inspector Park would pursue him, Baek Do-seok took a pregnant woman hostage inside the church. He wanted to use the haunting memory from that year to force Park to give him an escape route. Meanwhile, Inspector Kim had also caught up to the location where Nan Young-gil was being held. In order to keep him alive, he directly demanded a one-on-one fight with Inspector Kang. During the intense fight, unfortunately, his head collided forcefully with a glass cabinet, leaving him severely disoriented. Not knowing what to do, Inspector Park spotted Ho Jeong behind Baek Do-seok. He reluctantly complied with his demands, but Baek was far too strong for Ho Jeong to overcome. Although the woman was released, Park was shot in the shoulder, and Ho Jeong now had a gun pointed at his head. Just as he reached the entrance, Park saw Inspector Kim sitting slumped in front of Jong Han, clearly furious. Engaging in combat with Inspector Kang, upon seeing his partner injured, Inspector Kim was completely enraged. The nickname Mad Dog was now truly fitting for him. Fearing that Ho Jeong would actually be shot, Inspector Park used all his strength to knock Baek Do-seok down. They thought they had gained the upper hand, but unexpectedly, the situation shifted in an instant. Just as Inspector Park had hoped, all those connected to the murder of Kim Soon-young would face their just punishment. Even so, he wasn't truly happy, because Young Guk-jin had yet to be brought to justice. Therefore, he bought many things for his and his wife's future child. At the bookstore, seeing how self-deprecating he was, Hae-ju put the jacket she had specially bought for him on him. Along with her gentle and skillful consolation, she successfully helped him regain his fighting spirit, shaken from the Dongnam Church incident. Park Yong Han was affectionately nicknamed Angel of the Devil Hunters by everyone at the precinct. Although it was a joking nickname among them, it was also, in truth, a very apt description of him. No criminal went unpunished. If there was a case, he took it on. Not only that, two shoe shiners, who had been jailed for fighting with their colleagues, looked up to him as an example to better themselves each day so they could earn a living more easily. He had specially arranged for them to work at the police station. Their polished shoes would be paid for in full every day. Huge news for Team 1 was that Captain Yu had been directly promoted to Deputy National Police Chief. Immediately upon his promotion, Yu directly appointed Park Yong Han as the new captain of Team 1. They had planned to celebrate these two joyous events, but news that a burglar was breaking into Goryeo jewelry store put those plans on hold. Nothing was more important than catching criminals. Though he was already older, the respect people had for Mr. Park had not diminished. They still always remembered his acts of kindness and emulated them. During the meal, even though he knew Junaseo had finally caught the criminal Young Ho Chul, he didn't offer any praise. "The boy's just doing what a police officer should be doing," he said. Anyway, despite having to use a cane and finding it very difficult to move around, from early in the morning, Park Yong Han had gone to the burial site of Inspector Kim, Ho Jeong, Jong Hwan, Officer Nam, and Captain Yu to visit them. He talked to them for so long that he didn't realize he had fallen asleep. When he woke up, it was already sunset. Mr. Park could only say goodbye and leave, promising to come visit his colleagues again another day.